following program on Derana 24 is classified for general audience. It is intended for all ages. It contains little or no violence, no strong language, and little or no sexual dialogue or situations. We would like to remind our viewers that the views expressed in this program by our participating guests are solely viewpoints of them who take part, and does not reflect the views and beliefs of the Derana Media Network.
Welcome down to Gen XYZ right here on Derana 24. We're in conversation with a brilliant personality, by the way. We're talking about the importance of wildlife conservation, wildlife in general. Well, this is, of course, with Paul. Well, we're quite excited to have him right here in Sri Lanka, talking to you a little bit more as to what you need to know as well. Well, hi, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us today on Gen XYZ. As we're actually having a little conversation as well, I really want to know, now, you came into Sri Lanka, right? Sri Lanka is a very rich island when it comes to wildlife, when it comes to so many other aspects as well. What are your thoughts personally when you compare wildlife in Sri Lanka as opposed to around the world as well?
Well, it's difficult. It's a relatively small island, and it has 2.5 million visitors a year, and it doesn't have 2.5 million different species of animals, feathered, four-legged, and so critically it has to be managed properly. And I've spent much of the last 35 years around the world with endangered species, and the problems that they face here aren't particularly dissimilar to elsewhere in the world. But the real problem is that if care, compassion, conservation, and kindness are replaced or are ambushed by corruption and greed anywhere in the world, your wildlife will be the first to go. And the single most important thing is a live Yala leopard, a live Trincomalee blue or bride's whale is worth exponentially more alive than it is on the poacher's slab and sold to some ghastly flesh pot in China. So, you know, people have to, everybody, and it's not just the youngsters who are coming into this now, it's the old guys at the top as well. They all have to realize this. It's their birthright, and it's very easy to lose it.
That's very important, actually. I feel like a lot of youth members that are watching right now as well, it's about really loving nature, really loving Sri Lanka as well as a whole. But they're all very much engraved in terms of, hey, I want to be in the city's where it is, this is money, this is all of that. What do you have to say this? Because obviously you're from a different country as well, and you come to Sri Lanka.
First of all, falling in love with wildlife, loving wilderness areas achieves absolutely nothing. That's just a base feeling. Pragmatism is what saves them. Because otherwise, if it just goes on as it is, here or in other areas of the world, the numbers will suffer. They will. It's perfectly fixable. It's very easy to fix it as well. And when you notice youngsters now who are so savvy with all modern accoutrements, from phones to TikTok to Facebook to Snapchat, whatever it is, it's not a collective responsibility, but they have a remarkable opportunity to change things. As in some countries, the youngsters, the Gen Zs, have almost toppled governments. And not out of some gratification. They've done it because they feel it's the right thing to do. And anybody who replaces love with using the truth like a rapier, anybody who goes to, sees people misbehaving around wildlife and doesn't just take a photo and say how awful, but actually petitions their local politician, writes and make a noise about it, and isn't afraid of causing trouble. Those are the people who are really going to save things.
Yeah, that's very important.
It is. It is. I don't know how many times in my country, in UK, I've written to my MP, but it's hundreds, no, probably thousands. Over things that matter. And also, you can't criticize and just whine and moan. You have to be prepared to do something about it. because then hopefully, their children might be around to enjoy it.
Exactly, yeah. It's very sad that we see so many other species as well. Every day they're sort of going on extinction. And
Well,
that's just
let's be
terrible.
clear, this interview
Yeah.
will be, well, however long it is, but there'll be 2 elephants poached in Africa during that time.
Yeah, that's...
Probably by the time this goes to air, there'll be a handful of rhino taken as well. Let's be clear, rhino horn has a street value powdered of more than cocaine.
Yeah. See, I also want to sort of like touch base in terms of this, right? I feel like a lot of people find it very difficult because they think that, hey, you know what? This is ivory. We're going in terms of ivory. The elephants have ivory. It's money. It's money. It's money. The drive is money, right?
Yeah.
But they don't really understand. They're like, what? There's so many elephants. They're going to reproduce again. Why do we have to be concerned about one being killed or one that's not existing?
You have to be careful, and elephants is a complex one. Yeah. As anybody, even the most humble student of wildlife knows that elephants have 6 sets of teeth. When they, on their 6th set, they will be ground to almost nothing. That elephant's going to die, and he'll die a pretty nasty death of starvation. Yeah. So if somebody, wants that ivory or is prepared to shoot it and pay $100,000 for it, it has to enter the conversation. The thought of it to me is abhorrent. It's appalling. But as ever, that isn't really the issue. The issue is if somebody was prepared to pay that, and that money was then properly apportioned, and responsibly and sustainably spent, I think that's just got to be a place at the table, just at least, because otherwise, if you're a Botswanan farmer, a country that has looked after their elephants, and you lose your livelihood overnight because half a dozen of them plough through, how are they going to feel? Just because some tourist wants to see them, it is complex. But you bring in a question like an African rhino or a Nepali rhino or an Indian rhino, that there is no argument. Yeah. These things, or the animal I'm most associated with. If you do the most cursory scan on my name with Bengal tiger, you'll see what I've done for them and will continue to do, and the legacy it's left on my anatomy. But very simply, a Bengal tiger poached, cut up, it's all of its hide, its whiskers, its teeth, its penis, it's all sorts, all employed to be sold in those wet markets in Southeast Asia. That could be worth as much as $35,000, $40,000. Wow. Okay, so hold that figure. Take a live one, a female, who maybe has 4 or 5 litters in a national park in India, and think of all of the ancillary benefits, not just the park, not just the rangers, not just the guides, not just the drivers, but the guy who's, sells chapatis down the street, the hoteliers, the lodge owners, the transport guys, probably 3 or 4 dozen. Have a guess how much you think that female is worth. Just take a guess. Against the 40,000.
No idea.
As much as 80 to 100 million dollars. Okay, It's simple maths, that's all. It really is. They're worth so much more alive. But if only a few people are benefiting off that, why the hell should people care? And that's the key. When you get rich people just wanting to get richer, when you get stinking, venal, corrupt people in power just with their noses so far in the trough, they see the species, whatever the species, they see it as just a bank. We should all see it as a meal ticket for everybody. Yeah.
So what do you have to do in terms of changing that mindset? Because it's a very difficult thing, right?
It is. And you're right to ask that. And don't forget, different people are fueled by different things, and which is a good thing, because it would be dull if many are fueled by compassion, many are fueled by love, many by companionship, many by job satisfaction, work ethic, and some by rage. Rage is my thing. These many issues, I wake up angry. I frequently wake up in the night angry, thinking about them. But you have to channel it, because just screaming and shouting after a while, you don't get listened to. You have to be thoughtful. But the perpetrators of these great wildlife evils are, the one thing they don't like, particularly in Asia, is to lose face. You've got to make them squirm. You've got to embarrass them. You've got to absolutely belittle them, and as much in public as possible. because nobody likes that. Nobody, of course they don't. And this is what people can do nowadays. They absolutely can. And I've seen change with that. But I mean, but simple things. You've also got to make, for example, in Sri Lanka, you've got to make the experience. People have got to enjoy wildlife, but they've also got to feel, well, actually, I think I've benefited to that, not just I've ticked it off.
Yeah.
You know, at the moment, there's far too many vehicles in Yala. You know, people want to see...
I'm going to dial it back right now, okay?
Yeah.
We're going to dial it back into Sri Lanka, per se. I know there's a lot of cases where we do love our wildlife. We actually do, I'm not going to lie, we really
Totally.
do. But the thing is, we actually are very rural. There are certain areas that are quite rural where people do go and inhabit these areas. Then we have, you know, the wildlife, for example. We have leopards, we have, you know, elephants coming into Sri Lankan homes where they've actually established themselves and sort of destroy their houses, destroy their homes. So this is very scary at the same time as well, unless you're in their shoes. You don't know how to navigate these elephants, you know, going in, because it's destroying your house, it's destroying your livelihood. At the same time, you might be dead. You know, that's a very deep conversation.
Yep.
That's the problem we have in Sri Lanka.
Very difficult. Well, they have it in India, they have it in Africa.
Yeah.
No, absolutely it is.
So what is your take on this?
Well,
Because
there's enough money coming in from tourism, okay, to look after that. Let me tell you right away, you know, do your sums. If there's 155 vehicles at the main gate in Yala yesterday, with 4 or 5 people in each, come on. You know, even the most rudimentary mathematician can tell you there's enough rupees to sort out this human conflict.
Yeah.
Is it getting spent on it? No. And there's your problem. Areas have got to be properly fenced. You know, when I first came here, we saw a good number of leopards. And I heard of the problems which, when the leopards are pushed out from the family, they of course have to establish their own range. And you know, what is easier for them to catch, a fleet-footed spotted deer or a cow? You know, or a young cow. Of course it is. And the problem, of course, is leopards hunt at night. So we immediately raised them, or my lot immediately raised money for the metal pens to hold the cattle in at night. The problem goes away. Simple, pragmatic. Is it sexy? No. Are you going to get some Bollywood star standing in front saying, we're getting metal cattle? No, they're not, because as ever with these people, they want to make it about themselves, not about the project. So appropriation is the absolute answer. If the money is appropriately used, you know, that conflict is it's not gonna go away completely. And I'm not sure, in my heart of hearts, I want it to go away completely, because then are they really wild animals? You know, do we want every area to be heavily fenced, electric wired, all sorts? No, of course we don't. But if people have an idea of that there are simple solutions, and generally there always are.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think these animals survived during a time when there were very, very few tourists. I mean, obviously what happened up until 2009, but then of course post-tsunami, so they survived then. You know, they're made of pretty stern stuff, but you want that experience to be a good one, because the moment people feel, yeah, you know, I've really benefited this place, they become, to use the ghastly word, an ambassador for it.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. This is very deep as well, to be honest, because those are the conversations that need to go through as well. But I need to dig a little bit more deeper in terms of that conversation that you mentioned, in terms of funds going in, especially in the country, whether it be tourism, whether it be other forms of, you know, financing that's coming into the country. Where it needs to be placed. We'll talk a little bit more on the other side, but until then, this is of course Gen XYZ. We're in conversation with an award winner when it comes to wildlife conservation and wildlife photography as well. And this is of course Paul. Well, thank you once again for doing this with us on Gen XYZ. We'll jump into a short commercial break. Welcome back to Gen XYZ right here on Other Than 24. We're in conversation about something very, very essential and very important, specifically if you're a youth member as well, because you're going to be the future of the generation when it comes to, you know, saving our wildlife, saving our wild natures as well. We're very much in love with nature. We're very much in love with wildlife, but we don't really do the necessary things in terms of conserving them and, of course, taking care of them. We've actually got someone, obviously, we already introduced him. He's a world-winning, award winner as well when it comes to really loving nature, really doing amazing photography as well. And this is, of course, Paul. Well, thank you so much once again, Paul, for doing this on Gen XYZ. We spoke a little bit more in terms of, where you need to sort of like allocate the funds, especially when it comes to the financing in the country. We do have different inflows, but our primary inflow is tourism. The thing is, we did come through a very, very huge economic turmoil. So we are recovering certain things, right, when it comes to this main flow. But because of reasons like that, we need certain other aspects as well that we need to sort of allocate the funds. So we can't necessarily create another channel where it's going to be, saving these wildlife and saving all of this. That will be the last thing that we're going to think of, right? So what do you really have to say about this? Because it's not just,
I mean, look, I was here 3 years ago when, just over my left shoulder, there was protesters the whole way down to where I was staying. And the first thing I did when I checked in was go straight out and spend half an hour chatting to them. I had nothing but sympathy for them. When you see your country being pillaged in front of your eyes, good on them for protesting. Absolutely. And as with anything, the moment the police or army turn, then you get a result. But no, it's despicable, and sadly, it's not exceptional. So you're absolutely right. People are trying to put food on the table. People have bought fuel in their cars. They're going to say, well, I don't really care about a few leopards and a couple of whales. Not seeing the inherent value of them. I think once people start realizing that whole southern area of Sri Lanka, well, the southwest and southeast, when you have the twin, I don't know how many different whale species you've got, but it's a lot. That's an awful lot of money. And people are prepared to book it a long way in advance, which is always the sort of job number one for tourism. I've worked in tourism for 40 years, and that is always your biggest gain, is someone who says, yeah, and I want to come in 10 months' time, because it gets money in early. But unfortunately, at the moment, for example, if you went to Yala National Park tomorrow morning, there'd be 100 and I don't know how many vehicles outside the gate. It's far too many. It's not sustainable, and it's not a good experience. And it could be. First of all, they don't even change the opening and closing times throughout the year. The rule number one of wildlife anywhere is early and late, particularly in hot temperatures, and yet that flies in the face of it. So whoever lost his brains or just wasn't given any, who made that decision, he's the first, or she, needs to be humbled right away, okay? Because an extra half an hour is going to improve everybody's day. And unfortunately, if you've got a job for life and you're just a box ticker, they don't care. And they stand like schoolmasters and tick you off when you're a minute late coming out the park. How old am I? Secondly, you've got to limit the numbers. And you mustn't deny people the opportunity to see wildlife, because that's elitist. And certain countries have done that in Africa. But with somewhere like Yala, it's very easy. You have a core area, and you say you've got to pay more to go there, but you've got to be there for 3 nights. Okay, and the people who are just coming in as part of a tour, they can go to the other area. That's fine. So you give people the choice, but people who are serious about it, who really want to enjoy that place, they want to be there 3 days. And that way you create a 2-tier system. Everybody benefits. You could do it overnight. I suggested this 15 years. I've suggested similar things in other countries in the world. Has anything happened? Of course it hasn't. But maybe in the fullness of time, if enough people do it, and it's only common sense. What you mustn't do is employ outside consultants and who come in, with their stripy shirts and top knots and their ludicrous marketing phrases to compile a report that will get looked at or it won't. That costs money. And you've got more important things to spend your money on in Sri Lanka.
Yeah. I don't know. It's very contradictory, because we're getting a perspective from you as well, right? But at the same time, if you put yourself in the shoes of the Sri Lankans, the fellow Sri Lankans that really, live, breathe, eat everything in Sri Lanka, with, so many prices so high, spiked up as well. It's very difficult, with a small sum of salary that comes in as well.
Of course.
So even for them, okay, for example, if you take a youth member that's watching right now as well, who'd love to really get into this industry, really love doing all of this, but they can't really do it, because if they choose an industry like this...
I don't know about that. I think you are blessed so much here. The fact that, I took a walk this morning, and okay, it's not a great deal, but I walked past a couple of the water areas where you have everywhere. And I counted 31 different species of birds on a 15, 20-minute walk this morning.
Really?
I live in
Whoa.
London. I live in London.
In Colombo, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
In Colombo,
Wow.
your capital. I live in South London. You know,
Yeah.
31. I'd be lucky. Yeah, you know, we have plenty of birds,
yeah.
but nothing like that. No, you can't come in at the top level. You know, to use a cricketing analogy, you build an innings. You know, you do it in singles as well. So, and the joy is you don't have to go very far. You've got jungle cats on the city outskirts. You've got the most extraordinary ecology here. You could take a short drive almost anywhere. You've got monkeys just about everywhere. I mean, I played cricket the other morning. You know, there was a shrine. It was an army pitch we played on. There's langur monkeys jumping over the granite in the outfield.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get that elsewhere.
We got peacocks as well.
Well, yeah, peacocks is slightly different because they were generally brought.
Yeah,
they were almost an invasive species, but they are desperately colourful. They are so. Yeah, I mean, very few people start in with a, oh yes, my first wildlife experience was a game drive in Yala. I saw 3 leopards on granite. You know, you got to work for that a bit. You don't deserve that luck. You know, I like in COVID, I spent COVID doing a film on a couple of swans in a local crappy pond, which I had to cycle to because we were only allowed an hour each day to be outside. You know, you work with what you've got to start off with. One can't be spoiled about it. And you have an extraordinary diversity here. And in many areas, great concentrations. You have, and anybody who wants to pursue it, I would strongly recommend it. But as well, I can remember from Marissa here, a boat cutting the engine, and we could hear the blows of about 15 to 20 blue whales. We could see some of them as well, but yeah, and so sometimes it's not about cameras, it's not about optics, it's just about, oh my God,
wow,
you know, this is extraordinary. And then a school of about 100 dolphins, you know, porpoise by, and it is, you are lucky for that. You've just got to be careful in how you manage it, because you get 2.5 million arrivals. It's a relatively small country. You know, that has to be balanced out, and everybody's got to benefit.
What are the main places that you've actually traveled in Sri Lanka, which you think is just beautiful when it comes to, you know, wildlife and so much more?
There's plenty of areas that are beautiful. There's enormous disparity from 5,000 feet of tea country to, you know, your maritime attractions, and it fascinates me as well. You know, when I've spent quite a lot of time on the East Coast, you know, that I'm thinking, you know, I am on a small boat, you know, with 5 people. You know, this was gunboat territory before. You know, I know who controlled the fort, I know who controlled the hospital, and so historically it fascinates me. But no, the greatest areas are probably Wilpatu National Park, obviously the Minaret, the gathering of the elephants there, Yala, particularly if you can find a quieter area, which isn't easy. So almost a victim of its own success there. And Marissa, certainly, going offshore there. I mean, those are a few to start off with. But you don't have to get far from the city. You really don't.
I think it's very much in here as well, in Colombo, to be honest.
Yeah, but your coastline, you go down to the south coast, to Dondra, areas like that, it's magnificent. It really is. I mean, I remember being seduced when I first came here, but probably before you were born. And it hasn't changed that much. I mean, unfortunately now, and this is a big criticism of a lot of your audience, you know, next time you are at Dondra, or you are out on the water, or you are, I don't know, in Yala or something, do it without your mobile phone. You know, see if you can do it. See if you can do it, you know? And you know, that makes a huge difference, because it sanitizes and in many cases neuters. I mean, I've always said the worst words in the English language are content creator, Instagrammer, and influencer. Because what it says to me is, just get a proper job, will you?
Get a proper job.
Yeah, exactly. Because you clearly can't. You've never had one. Because it's superficial, and in many instances vacuous. People, it's always about them and something. No, the most important thing you can do, whether it's a holiday, whether it's a wildlife species, whether it's a wilderness area, is research. And only you can do that. And there a phone is useful. When I first started, I would go to the library for hours. So research is critical. And you should form your own ideas.
Yeah,
about these
what's
species.
the biggest experience you've actually had in Sri Lanka that has still left a mark in your life?
Oh,
when
no
it comes
question.
To, yeah.
If you're coming to my lecture, it's one of the first images I show. And I've had some good ones, but no, it was off Trincomalee in 2017, and we're probably quite a number of miles off, and we saw the blue whales blow. And the boats are very sensitive. Well, most of them are. There's always
Right.
charlatans and cowboys and chancers who have to do it cheaper and worse off. With any wildlife experience, there's always a cheaper way of doing it. And it's very easy to see why it's cheaper. But anyway, we dropped off, and I'd trained for 6 months to be in the water with cetaceans. And yeah, this blue whale swam towards me.
Swam towards you, okay.
Towards me,
And this is in Trincomalee.
And paused. Yeah, I mean, we're in 3,000 feet of water, probably, I don't know, 15 nautical miles from shore. And it paused just for a moment from me to you. So
Yeah.
this thing is 6 times the size, 6 London double-decker buses. And then it just turned and just dived straight down in front. And I went down after it. I remember my ears screaming. And I had my camera in a whatever you call it, a harness or housing. And just then, I just have it set like, nothing like the gentleman filming now.
Yeah.
But it was just point and press, and my ears were popping. And then I just remember, I thought, and as I decompressed, and I just sort of slowly floated, and this thing just then disappeared. And I came out, sort of ripped my mask off. And my eyes were like saucers. It was like, that thing could, that could have been me done, but even by accident. But strangely, enormously humbling. And whales, let's take humpback, a smaller, a humpback is only 25, 30 tons. It's a classic case. Humpbacks were butchered to almost oblivion. And then we stopped. And now there's over 1 million of them in the world, humpback whales. And who would have thought, but if you stop killing them, they thrive. Who would have thought that works? It's an extraordinary thing. Yeah, I mean...
I can't. Okay. I love the sarcasm that you're actually applying there as well. But, the thing is, it's so... We're actually naturally gifted, if you put it that way, right? So thank you very much once again, for coming to Sri Lanka, really just sort of like put it out there into our eyes and put it out there and say, hey, you know what? We had the opportunity, or you had the opportunity to actually go and explore our nature, go and explore wildlife as well, and why we need to really prioritize this. And something else that I want to touch base as well is in terms of, the youth members watching it right now, right? How can they sort of like earn a bit more, or how can they sort of make this a career when it comes to loving wildlife and so forth?
Well, they have an advantage. I'm a photographer, I'm a stills photographer, but I'm fully aware that, interestingly, I was in Antarctica about 18 months ago, and I had about 30 quite young Chinese people on board. They're absolutely lovely, but it was a photographic departure. TikTok, that was their thing. And I must say my jaw dropped. I was like, you are kidding me. But they were extraordinarily adept at, within minutes, producing this short, snappy little video. And it's so important. I always say with a photograph, imagine you're showing it to your 13-year-old nephew or niece. Do they want to see, the zebra, it's moved its ear now, and hang on, I'm a bit bored now. Imagine a 25-second, little well-edited vignette. Yeah, absolutely. It's very difficult to make money these days. It's like anybody who wants to, I want to be a TV chef. It's not going to happen, because you've only got to turn on Instagram. Everybody's telling you how to cook steak or how to make a different salad. It's the same with wildlife. There's any number of things. But if you happen to be there and you get that video, that just something unusual. It's when I judge a photo competition, I'm looking for degree of difficulty, but most of all, I'm looking for originality. So you might just be the person who gets it. And then, media channels will want it. Of course they will. Yeah. There's a huge, almost rapacious desire for this now. It's constantly fueled. It's not, it was initially a newspaper every day, and then it went to TV channels, and then news channels, and then rolling news, and now it's the constant feed from people's cell devices. And wildlife can't keep up. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but patience is not a virtue with wildlife or filming. It's a must, and you've got to put in time.
Yeah.
And you've got to put in time even when the prospects are poor or the weather is bad, it just looks like a barren spell. You just do. The amount of times, thousands of game drives on, that I will jump in my businesses in Kenya and drive out and the weather's rubbish and you think, oh, but you just don't know. Because in the potent game areas, they can always surprise you, which is how it should be. And it shouldn't be easy either.
It needs
just
to be a
shouldn't.
challenge.
Yeah, we wouldn't do it otherwise. We just wouldn't.
Well, there's something very interesting that you've actually come to Sri Lanka specific to actually showcase as well. It's the impossible shot.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit more on the other side, but this is, of course, a conversation with Paul right here on Gen XYZ. We'll be back after a short commercial break. Welcome back to Gen XYZ, where we're in conversation with Paul, who's obviously a superstar right here in Sri Lanka. He's well known as well when it comes to award-winning photography, specifically in wildlife as well, and conservation. We're in conversation about conservation. We spoke about the youth being why you need to actually, protect Sri Lanka, so rich in wildlife as well, and what exactly you can do specifically wherever you are in terms of even saving the cats, saving the wildlife, the dogs, the birds, all of those little things that you can actually do in making that impact as well. This is something very interesting that we spoke in the previous segment as well in terms of InShot. Now, this is obviously an impossible shot. What does it actually mean, Paul? Like, just tell us exactly what it is, and how people that are actually watching now as well, how they can take part.
Well, first of all, it doesn't really matter what you're photographing, because there's never going to be a 10 out of 10 photograph. There just isn't, but particularly with wildlife. And I look at thousands of images a year. No, not mine, guests, people I guide. I do. And everybody knows what a savage and brutal, and you have to be very brave to send me anything, because if I think anything's lazy or predictable or a chocolate box photo or just a record shot, it'll never get above a 2. It just won't, because I've seen it before. And it's very easy to spout originality, but that can sometimes mean new light through old windows. But unless you are that brutal, and the biggest critic of anybody's photographic work should be them. And so when people send me images, and they sometimes put a caveat under each one, I particularly like this one, and I'm like, oh no,
Really?
How do I bring them down from this one? And it is desperately hard, and I'm very hard on myself. And in all the years I've photographed, I've probably only taken 6 or 7 photographs out of a million that have been defining ones. But I like it that way. I do. They're not predictable. They're not in a zoo. And just a portrait, unless it's something extraordinarily rare, just doesn't really butter my parsnips, I'm afraid. I like something to really, when I'm judging competitions, I want to, wow, hang on.
Yeah.
And I would far rather an ambitious photograph, something taken at a slow shutter speed or taken at a silly angle, than I would a safe one. And a flawed, ambitious one to me is always better than a safe image. So yeah, the quest goes on. A few times I've come to, I think I gave myself a 7.
Do they have to put up a story as well as to how they captured it?
No, they don't have to, but it's often
shot.
more interesting. I'm not interested in the camera details, I'm interested in the story behind it. And I want to see pain and graft and, maybe people have broken limbs or something, to get this. And, I do, because that's the only way now. 30 years ago, it was much easier because not many people were doing it. Now people can go out with it, you've got raw files on smartphones, all sorts of editing, but it's got to be what you've taken. The pages of social media in terms of wildlife are filled 90% with overcooked, over-processed photos, which is just flagrant examples of fraud. It's not representative, and it's cooked, and I can't stand it. You know, do it properly, because if people take photographs and then they spend forever, you know, well, frankly, forever can constitute over 20 seconds processing. It's not really theirs, is it? You know, it's not what they've seen. And too often I see, particularly with cats, which is my thing, cheetahs, leopards, lions, you know, they're taken in a cloudy day, yet they glow like Atlanta housewives. You know, it's ridiculous. It really is, and it's cheating. And you know, it is hard, and it's frustrating. And I always say it's the rule of six. I always say it's when they let you down. Yeah, no meeting should ever be over 6 minutes, and no anger should ever be over 6 seconds. And yeah, you know, when I can remember 9.5 hours waiting in Kenya for a cheetah to hunt, and it did, and it was extraordinary. And just as it closed in on this impala, it knocked it, and it was the only bush in the whole open plains, and that's where it got it. And yeah, you're going to swear a bit. And the cheetah got a meal for itself and its cubs. You know, what's more important? It's just a photograph. You know, let's not get ahead of ourselves. You know, some of the nonsense people write. You know, I'm not a photographer, I'm a capturer of light. Really? I'll tell you what you are. It's nonsense, it is. No, you keep your eyes on the ball. But conversely, you know, when the ridiculous and lame lines of utter bile about, oh yes, my photos do such a lot of good, they, you know, the exposure they give to endangered species. Hey, if it means that much to you, put your hand in your pockets. I started my tourism business in a developing world in Kenya 25 years ago this month. And we started with 5 staff. I've got about 180 now. It's probably 2,000 livelihoods all on the back of that. We're still independent. We've not been bought out. We've not been sold out. There's not been some ghastly venture capitalist involved. And there's a lot of livelihoods on my shoulders for that. It matters, and it matters to me. And that's how, where we helped build the, or not build, but the conservation initiative. In Kenya you have conservancies where there are vehicle limits. There are minimum 350 acres per tourist. There are limits on numbers of people in the area, and all the money is audited twice a year. So every penny you can account for. That's a big deal. No one else has it. And they have the largest growing population of lions in the world. Who would have thought that would work, eh? As I said at the beginning, you know, simple, pragmatic, common sense ideas, but there has to be a line of trust involved. You know, both mentally but financially as well. And then everybody benefits. Yala leopards, Kenyan leopards, you know, they all benefit.
So those that are actually watching and wants to sort of like come, maybe even work with you, you know, how can they actually do that?
Work with me? Well, they struggle in Kenya because they need a work permit, and that's a big problem. And likewise, there's plenty of Kenyans who can do the job there. But I think there's big potential here. It's like a photographer. If you took a photograph of an elephant, and I was next to you, and I took one, and we took them, and we put 2 10x8 prints on this table here, and we asked your crew to have a look at them, okay? And they look at mine 3 or 4 seconds longer than yours, of the same animal. That's all it is. That's all it is. You want this program to be looked at more than your competitors. That's all it is. Doesn't mean mine's better. It means it's more interesting. It's the same as, you know, somebody wants to go and be a guide in Yala, in Minaret, in Wilpatu. They've got to think, how am I going to do this different? Am I just going to get in the vehicle and drive and say leopard, gestation period, 3.5 months? You know, say, not. You know, it's a multi-faceted job. You know, you have those people for a limited amount of time, and I always say to my staff, if people leave having spent 4 or 5 days with us in the bush, in the wilderness, in Kenya, and they say to my guide, or tearfully, you know, this is the best 3 or 4 days of life. My children have learnt more in the last 5 days than they did the last 5 semesters at school. Or I never thought it could actually be like this. The wilderness does still exist. This has been the most transformational time of my life. If that isn't enough for you, go and get another job. I mean it. Go and get another, because you're not going to get fat on it. And any of these youngsters, keen as mustard youngsters, think they're going to retire early on working in tourism or forget it, all right? It's not going to happen. The money's just not there. And if that matters to you, again, go and get another job.
Yeah. You've been very brutal
Yeah,
with a lot of things, but I think that's the authenticity that you're bringing in as well on the table, saying that, hey, this is why I have the awards, this is why I have the credentials and all of that. So it's amazing to actually have this conversation with you as well. Paul, I want to touch base in terms of, something that you brought in terms of, editing and so much more. But now there's something called AI, okay, artificial intelligence. If that is also indulged in, what exactly is your take on this?
Well, I mean, you've known me about an hour and you've asked a question I think you know the answer to. I think it utterly stinks. And I would say the same about this chat GPT. Absolute nonsense. I write 500 words a day minimum. Have done for 25, 30 years, all right? You don't, what did the old golfer say? The harder you practice, the luckier you get. AI and chat GPT and all of this, it's laziness, it's not authentic, it's misleading, it's misrepresentative, it's fraud, okay? I can't stand it. I will fight poaching, I will fight stinking, corrupt government officials, I will fight AI as well. Yes,
okay.
I will.
You're going to fight AI?
Well, I mean, it's just, I see, what did I see the other day? A little film of somebody rescuing a polar bear because it had barnacles all over it. A polar bear, barnacles. I mean, when was that ever recorded? And it had millions of admirers, and I always post the same thing, reply. I read it and just says, please. It insults my stupidity, let alone my intelligence. And I think some people, you can use an AI thing when you're, I don't know, if I've got some rubbish on my sensor and you get a couple of specks on your image, and AI will do, it just saves you a bit of time. I don't have any problem with that. Of course I don't. But yeah, anything else. It's just, and it gives such a jaundiced view of wildlife and wilderness. But also I think it's extraordinarily demeaning. It denigrates and diminishes and besmirches an area that we've done our very best to ruin anyway. That's why when people talk about, human interference, you should never interfere with animals. Excuse me? Hang on a second, I can assure you, if I've watched a cheetah spend 4 days with cubs try to hunt, and it finally knocks over a bit of dinner before they all die of starvation, and a hyena turns up, and you've never seen, you've never seen a thin hyena, they all look like Republicans at the breakfast bar. Have I interfered, and have I driven my car and got out and shooed the hyena? Yeah, I have, and I'll continue to do it. And anybody who wants to have that sanctimonious argument with me, bring it into the ring, because you're going to lose badly. 99% of these animals' problems have originated from humans. So if we can redress the balance every now and then, fine. But to see what the damage we have done, the amount of species we have lost, and then to put the salve on it of AI to make it all look pretty, it's patronizing, it's demeaning, it's got everything wrong with it. I'll keep fighting that one. You can add that to the many battles.
You can, okay, all right. So some of the battles, obviously, that you mentioned as well is definitely AI, is definitely so many other factors as well. But in Sri Lanka, what do you personally see that you can actually sort of put into that list as well and fight, saying that, hey, I'm going to fight this for Sri Lanka?
Well, I think, first of all, anybody coming here, don't just box tick wildlife. Before you come, do your research properly. Actually, don't expect to go to a national park for a day and come away with dream images, or it's not going to happen. Spend proper time there. Secondly, if there are disconnects with a tourism experience that can be easily fixed, pressurize the people who are making the decisions. This timing issue is absurd, and that's very easily fixed. Even India, hardly a paragon of smooth running, zero bureaucracy. Even they alter it 3 or 4 times a year because the days are longer at certain times. So if you're coming behind India on that, really, come on, you're in the retard lane on that one, I'm afraid. So you need. No,
okay.
I'm serious. Right. You've got to deal with it, because the biggest asset you can have with wildlife tourism is getting people returning. Repeat business. It costs nothing to get people coming back. You ask any travel company, it's repeat and referral. So if you get it right and fix a few simple things, you get them coming, and more often than not, they'll come for longer.
Yeah.
So everybody benefits. And I'll tell you something else. The standard of many of the guides I have met in these areas stand up with anywhere else in the world. And I've guided 6 continents. Yeah. And let me tell you, there's some of them who are, first of all, linguistically, they're very strong. Secondly, it's not easy here.
It is.
You haven't got open plains or everything. It's not easy. You've got a limited road network, but they're outstanding. So and that's a big deal. There's many areas of the world where there's no qualifications required. There's many things that can go wrong. But yeah. So I think we should be very proud of that.
I know there's a lot that is actually taking place right now in your trip in Sri Lanka. You've got Chitral, who actually took you around as well, and he's launching something as well. We'll have a little chat with him as well. But before that, I've got one question for you, Paul. It could be the final question, okay? I want to know the one word that you actually have to say for those that are watching it right now as well, if they want to pursue what they have to do when it comes to wildlife photography, or wildlife conservation in general. To be honest, one word.
Well, I think that the two are separate, certainly in terms of photography.
Yeah.
It's with a hyphen, self-critical.
Self-critical,
yeah.
Okay.
Savagely so. And in terms of conservation, one word is, this is proper
one word.
No,
Word.
Good, very good journalism. Yes, commitment.
Commitment, it's very important. Yeah.
24/7 commitment. It's not a hobby.
It's not a hobby.
You've got to swallow the ethic whole. Without commitment, you can do something else. Because to be effective, you've got unequivocal commitment. Don't be afraid of upsetting people, even your friends.
It's amazing. Thank you so much, Paul, for really doing this with us. We'll have a little chat with Chitral as well on the other side.
Yeah, sure.
All right, welcome down to Gen XYZ. Well, as we were in conversation with Paul, the very infamous person, of course, right here in our motherland in Sri Lanka, we also have someone else who's actually taken him around as well and really been searching for one particular thing, and this is the black panther, right? Fortunately, he's actually found the black panther, or he's looking forward to it as well. And today, he's got a very important presentation. So we got to really talk to him about this. And this is Chitral. Well, thank you so much for doing this with us. Now, tell me, I know this has been a discovery for you of wanting to find the black panther. How was that like for you?
It's been a journey for 10 years, since 2015. The first news came out when there was a black panther seen often in Kabini, south of India. So we've been there several times with no luck. I almost given up. And then my daughter dragged me to see this Marvel movie with Black Panther, and it's kind of the love, reignited. And then we got this news about in Kenya, in Laikipia, where this female Black Panther called Giza is much easier to see. So we went there 3 years ago, bang on target, like a doctor's appointment. She came up. 2 days we saw her, and since then we've gone 3 times in a row. And fortunate, all 3 times we've been lucky. Yeah, it's been an awesome experience.
Yeah. So what is this whole aspiration against or towards when it comes to black panthers? Like, I mean, you do have panthers, you do have leopards as well, available everywhere around the world. But what is it with the black panther? What is it? Is it because of the movie, or what is it?
No, it's certainly not the movie. It just stands out by itself. Black panthers are leopards. It's the same species, just melanistic. There's too much melanin in their coat, makes them look black. If you look carefully under a bright spot or the sunrise or the sunset, you can still see the black rosettes on that black skin. But man, the color stands out so well in a drying, environment. It's almost like a dream for most nature photographers. It's a box to tick. There are groups on social media saying Black Panther groups, but I'm in none of them. For me, it just was a dream. I've chased leopards in Sri Lanka, India, and Africa for about 35 years. But just to see one was beautiful. And to get this Black Panther in its territory, in its habitat, hunting. And the last time I was there, 45 days ago, we saw her hunting twice. So that was just magical. And I actually was very fortunate to have my daughter who accompanies me in the wilds. So yeah, unforgettable experience.
All right. Now, for those that are actually watching in right now as well, the youth members who do love the wild, maybe not so much of the wild as well, they might not actually like it, but why is it important that we actually take care of our wild nature, especially in Sri Lanka, because they're very rich in terms of wildlife, right? Why is that important?
Oh, Sri Lanka, we are almost spoiled for choice. We have too much. In such a small country, 22 million people, we still have, 6,000 elephants in the wild or more? Perhaps one of the most dense populations of leopards in the world. 27 cetaceans, blue whales at sea. Man, this is a melting pot. It's a hot spot. But we have to look after this because this is not replaceable. Once it's gone, it's gone. Extinct is forever. And there are lots of problems. Conservationists, the Department of Wildlife, they're doing a lot of work. It's not enough. We need to join hands so that what we see today will be there for, people who will walk this planet after us.
After us as well. Well, wonderful. Thank you very much for doing this, actually. I think it's very essential that you're really doing this, Mark, when it comes to, inspiring other youth members as well to really love wildlife and, take care of it as well. So thank you once again for doing this right here on Gen XYZ.
Thank you for having me.
Well, with that, of course, this is a wrap right here on Gen XYZ. We'll give you a different other flavor as well on Out There in a 24. But until then, if you do miss out on an episode, we are available on youtube.com/OutThereInEnglish. And with that, catch you on a different one.